Hello, welcome back to Sample Chapters. This is part 2 of my review of the book Mr. God, This is Anna. I decided to put this review into 2 parts because it was 10 minutes 37 and I was still going on and I hadn't read the first part of chapter 1, and because it's one of these books that really draws you in, I wanted to share that with you so that you could see what type of book it is. Basically, you will need to watch part 1 first to get an overview, because I have mentioned 2 potential negatives that you do need to know before you become interested in getting the book, to make sure that you're okay about those things. Basically, this is a book about a young man who was 19 years old. He was out one day having a smoke in Docklands area late at night, and this 5-year-old girl with no shoes on, I don't think, was just sat there freezing cold, hungry, didn't know where she'd come from, and basically he ended up taking her home to his mother, who likes to take home homeless people anyway, and they discovered that she had been neglected and abused, and she becomes like the surrogate, the foster child, but not legally. And he knew this child for 3.5 years, and then she had a tragic accident and died. But it's all about her amazing perception of her relationship with God and things that she knows about God, and her amazing relationship with him. And when she died, he was so grieving that he thought he would put an account of his relationship with her in the short 3.5 years that he had the pleasure of knowing her into a book. So I'm just going to read you the first part of chapter 1 so you can see what type of book it is. Okay. The difference from a person and an angel is easy. Most of an angel is in the inside, and most of a person is on the outside. These are the words of 6-year-old Anna, sometimes called Mouse, Hum or Joy. At 5 years, Anna knew absolutely the purpose of being. She knew the meaning of love and was a personal friend and helper of Mr. God. At 6, Anna was a theologian, a mathematician, a philosopher, poet and gardener. If you asked her a question, you would always get an answer in due course. On some occasions, the answer would be delayed for weeks or months, but eventually, in her own good time, the answer would come, direct, simple, and much to the point. She never made 8 years. She died by an accident. She died with a grin on her beautiful face. She died saying, "I bet Mr. God lets me get into heaven for this." And I bet he did too. I knew Anna for just about 3.5 years. Some people lay claim to fame by being the first person to sail around the world alone, or to stand on the moon, or by some other act of bravery. All the world has heard of such people. Not many people have heard of me, but I too have a claim to fame, for I knew Anna. To me, this was the high peak of adventure, for I knew her on her own terms, the way she demanded to be known, from the inside first. Most of my angel is in the inside, and this is the way I learnt to know her, my first angel. Since then I have learnt to know 2 other angels, but that's another story. My name is Finn. Well, that's not quite true. My real name doesn't matter all that much, since my friends all call me Finn, and it's stuck. If you know your Irish mythology, you will know that Finn was pretty big. Me too. Standing about 6'2", weighing some 16 stone odd, close to being a fanatic on physical culture, the son of an Irish mother and a Welsh father, with a passion for hot saveloys and chocolate raisins. Not together, I might add. My great delight was to roam about Docklands in the night time, particularly if it was foggy. My life with Anna began on such a night. I was 19 at the time, prowling the streets and alleys with my usual supply of hot dogs, the street lights with their foggy halos showing dark, formless shapes moving out from the darkness of the fog and disappearing again. Down the street a little way, a baker's shop window softened and warmed the raw night with its gas lamps. Sitting on the grating under the window was a little girl. In those days, children wandering the streets at night were no uncommon sight. I had seen such things before, but on this occasion it was different. How or why it was different has long since been forgotten, except that I'm sure it was different. I sat down beside her on the grating, my back against the shop front. We stayed there about 3 hours. Looking back over the 30 years, I can now cope with those 3 hours. but at the time I was on the verge of being destroyed. That November night was pure hell. My guts tied themselves into all manner of complicated knots. Perhaps even then something of her angelic nature caught hold of me. I am quite prepared to believe that I had been bewitched from the beginning. I sat down with a "Shove up a bit, Titch." She shoved up a bit but made no comment. "Have a hot dog," I said. She shook her head and answered, "It's yours." "I got plenty. Besides, I'm full up," I said. She made no sign, so I put the bag on the grating between us. The light from the shop window wasn't very strong, and the kid was sitting in the shadows, so I couldn't see what she looked like, except that she was very dirty. I could see that she clutched under one arm a rag doll, and on her lap a battered old paint box. We sat there for 30 minutes or so in complete silence. During that time, I thought there had been a movement of her hand towards the hot dog bag, but I didn't want to look or comment in case I put her off. Even now I can feel the immense pleasure I had when I heard the sound of that hot dog skin popping under the bite of her teeth. A minute or two later she took a second and then a third. I reached into my pocket and brought out a packet of Woodbines. "Do you mind if I smoke while you're eating, Titch?" I asked. "What?" She sounded a little alarmed. "Can I have a fag while you're eating?" She rolled over and got to her knees and looked me in the face. "Why?" she said. "My mum's a stickler for politeness. Besides, you don't blow smoke in a lady's face when she's eating," I said. She stared at half a sausage for a moment or two, and looking at me fully, she said, "Why? Why do you like me?" I nodded. "You have a fag then," and she smiled at me and popped the rest of the sausage into her mouth. I took out a Woodbine and lit it up and offered her the match to blow out. She blew and I was sprayed with bits of sausage. This little accident produced such a reaction in her that I felt I had been stabbed in the guts. I had seen a dog cringe before, but never a child. The look she gave me filled me with horror. She expected a thrashing. She clenched her teeth as she waited for me to strike her. What my face registered I don't know, perhaps anger and violence or shock or confusion. Whatever it was, it produced from her the most piteous whimper. I can't describe this sound after all these years. No words are fitting. The feeling I can still taste, can still experience. My heart faltered at the sound and something came undone inside me. My clenched fist hit the pavement beside me, a useless gesture in response to Anna's fears. Did I think of that image then, that image which I now think of, the only one that fits the occasion? That perfection of violence, that ultimate horror and bewilderment of Christ crucified. That terrible sound that the child made was a sound that I never wished to hear again. It attacked my emotional being and blew a fuse. After a moment or two I laughed. I suppose that the human mind can only stand so much grief and anguish. After that the fuses blow. It did with me. My fuses blew in a big way. The next few minutes I know very little about, except that I laughed and laughed, then I realised that the kid was laughing too. No shrunken bundle of fear. She was laughing. Kneeling on the pavement and leaning forward with her face close to mine and laughing and laughing. So very many times in the next 3 years I heard her laughter. No silver bells or sweet rippling sounds was her laughter, but like a 5-year-old's bellow of delight, a cross between a puppy's yelp, a motorbike and a bicycle pump. I put my hands on her shoulders and held her off at arm's length, and then came that look that is entirely Anna's. A mouth wide open, eyes popping out of her head like a whippet straining at the leash. Every fibre of that little body was vibrating and making a delicious sound. Legs and arms, toes and fingers, the whole of that little body shook and trembled like Mother Earth giving birth to a volcano. And what a volcano it released in that child. Outside that baker's shop in Dockland on a foggy November night, I had the unusual experience of seeing a child born. After the laughter had quietened off a bit, but while her little body was still thrumming like a violin string, she tried to say something, but it wouldn't come out properly. You. After a little time and a great deal of effort, she managed, "You love me, don't you?" Even if it had not been true, I couldn't have said no. To save my life, I couldn't have said no. True or false, right or wrong, there was no one answer. So I said yes. She gave me a little giggle and pointed a finger at me and said, "You love me," and broke into a primitive gyration around the lamppost, chanting, "You love me, you love me, you love me." A moment later she said, "I ain't half thirsty." So we upped and went along the pub just down the road. I bought a large bottle of Guinness and she wanted one of those ginger pops with the marble at the neck. Right, I'm just going to get to the end of the first chapter because I don't want to bore you. Basically, what happened was he took her home and his mum accepted her into the home. He explained that he'd found her on the street and they decided to give her a bath, and as they took her clothes off, she was covered in bruises. And they realised then that this poor little girl, whoever had looked after her, had really badly abused her. So they were going to take her to the police, but the little girl insisted, "Don't take me to the police, please don't take me to the police." The cop shop, she called it. So they just adopted her. And he got to know her really well. And then one day, when she was 7.5, she fell out of a tree onto some railings. And you can imagine how much it broke his heart, because all through the time that he knew her, she was coming out with the most amazing things about God. She loved God. She never said anything about how bad she felt towards whoever did those things to her. She just loved God. The only negative I would say at this point is it's almost too much talk about Mr. God. It's Mr. God this, Mr. God that, Mr. God this. And when I first read the book, I did find that a bit monotonous. But apart from that, it's a really good book. So I will leave a link in the description to show you where you can get that book from. And I usually try to search around for the cheapest price for you. I'm not on commission, I'm not an affiliate, I just like recommending good books. The guy does mention that he smoked and things like that. I'm not sure if he was a Christian or if he became a Christian later on, I can't remember. I have read the book recently, but I haven't read it all the way to the end again. So yes, but it does give God the glory, because this little girl basically just loved God, and when she was dying, she just said, "I bet God will let me into heaven for this." And she just had such a pure spirit. So it's a nice book. There are some good reviews on Google if you want to look at the reviews about this book, and go on to Amazon and have a look at the reviews yourself. And if you like the sound of the book and you get it, please let me know what you thought of it. Until then, I will say goodbye, and I have got another really good book review to bring to you very shortly. Until then, I'll see you soon. Bye bye.